If a mayfly was a film fan and tuned in when a child, they'd miss their teenage years and come out an adult. Top Gun? More like Top Dumb.
Take a peek, gentlemen. There's a meteor bigger than King Kong's first dump of the day. And it's steaming straight towards us.
Red Dwarf's the best. Known as King of the Beasts, along with the eighth wonder of the world, this simian superpower struck awe into the theatres across the US when RKO Pictures debuted King Kong in 1933. For people that watched a train heading towards them on film, then running out of the theatre yelling for their lives only a few decades earlier, just screaming when seeing the giant ape and remaining seated was a decided improvement. It may look, well, okay, it does look old hat and a little bit goofy today, but you have to remember we're talking nearly a century ago, when everyone thought the moon was made of cheese. Or was that just my ancestors? In actuality, the effects employed are impressive today. Ask anyone who knows about the construction of films, and they'll tell you how genuinely impressive those effects are today. The Ape's creator, Miriam C. Cooper, became fascinated with gorillas when a child, and when at RKO had the idea of making a terror gorilla picture, and so Kong was born. Using a collection of miniatures, mats, stop motion, and good old puppetry, Cooper managed to create a movie whose scale matched that of its titular star. A movie of this size, where they not only created Kong, but an entire island with prehistoric beasts, had no right to be conceived, let alone executed, as the filmmaking issues the story creates are legion, and required groundbreaking work in the movie industry to be produced. However, these techniques were pioneered, and the world's collective jaws dropped on cue, and a silver screen legend was born. Nearly a century's worth of technical innovation has made Kong almost photorealistic, something achieved completely with his simian cousin on film in the newest Planet of the Apes trilogy. However, that's where the improvements stopped. The charm, wit and emotional soul of the original have been left threadbare and replaced with tertiary characters, little charm and only half of the wit. I'm Mr. Rhett, and these are my top 10 pet peeves for King Kong. Number 1. Kong caring about our human protagonists. This issue of relating to other human characters is obviously down to intuition and perception. Anyway, should the writers not continue their streak of writing characters in every piece of media that Kong exists in that make me want to be sick down their backs, Kong has the emotional and rational age of, what, a 2-year-old? It would be like us going out of our way to save a couple of specific hamsters whilst battling a velociraptor when a whole bunch of other hamsters were firing little but extremely painful fireworks at us. But because of plot armor covered protagonists, they have to make it to the end because the studio executives and people who write these things have the imagination and creativity of a pile of mashed potatoes. He has to give two shits about a little girl, when in real life he'd eat her entire family, then use her body to wipe his bum. Well, we've paid this teenage actor a quarter of our budget because of her social media numbers, so we need her on screen for at least 96 minutes. Or was it 97? Yes, they're saying it needs to be 97. Oh, and her new action figure has her with a torn shirt, showing her midriff, so work on her having to tear the lower half of her shirt to tie around in a very flimsy way someone's leg that has been blown apart because a lightly applied piece of fabric on horrendous ballistic wounds apparently means that that person can now carry on having jiu-jitsu matches with velociraptors whilst performing parkour on palm trees. Can't remember exactly which film that was in, but it definitely, probably, possibly is in a film. Might have been a dream. Number 2. Size differences. Difference in the perception of sizes is something men deal with every day, is a sentence I once heard a man say. Often shy appendages aren't fully on show, unlike King Kong and his baffling consistent changes in size. He has stood at 12 feet tall, and he has stood at 335 feet tall. In Kong Skull Island, he's essentially a kaiju. and he has even had his size manipulated to change throughout the very same movie. That this is done by design is perplexing. The rationale is to have him matching whichever environment he is in at any one time, so large and imposing when approached by helicopters early on in Skull Island, or small enough to climb the exterior of the Empire State Building. Yet instead of adjusting his stature to make sense visually for an audience, this technique only succeeds in puzzling them when observing an already enigmatic character. I swear it was 335 feet long yesterday. I don't know what to tell you. It's your fault for not putting the heating on. Okay, number 3. Human plots means nothing when millions are dying. This was detailed in our Godzilla episode last week. Click on the little grey thing at the top of the screen to watch that, so I shan't go into too much detail and repeat myself. However, the sheer amount of dead people Kong lays in his wake during his fight with Godzilla in Hong Kong, along with some of the stone-cold murdering he has gotten up to over the years, although usually after being provoked, to be fair, makes it hard to reconcile with the compassionate and empathetic character the movies keep attempting to portray him as. Number 4. Aircraft flying too close. It's an iconic sight and remnant from old Hollywood that brings forth awe in audiences today. The sight of a rampant King Kong atop the Empire State Building, grabbing biplanes out of the air without hardly breaking a sweat, and destroying the pilots and their flying machines. Maybe the novelty of the situation can be used as rationale when explaining away the pilot's ineptitude at not staying outside of the Leviathan's reach. However, in Kong Skull Island, when he has torn through half your air-based fleet, and you still cannot steer clear of the simian's grip, one can only blame oneself. Top Gun? More like Top Dumb. Take that out. This is a persistent case of negligence that should obviously be pointed towards the writers and directors rather than any of the characters living in this world. Any air-based heroes that come across Kong's fight partner, Godzilla, meet a similar fate, with their inability to stay away from errant arms and deadly tails. They can fire missiles from dozens of miles away, and any close-up weaponry that are bullet-based are clearly ineffective, so this trope could do with being crushed itself. Number 5. Kong 2005's poor effects. Disparaging Weta, the visual effects team behind the Lord of the Rings trilogy, coincidentally the first movies they worked on which won them Oscars, is a bit like throwing Rotten Tomatoes at a happy Labrador. However, I'm sure even themselves would rather take another go at certain scenes. There are points which the effects team clearly spent most of their time on, because some scenes CGI is luscious and fantastic. However, even for a movie nearly 2 decades old, some of the blue screen keying and CGI is legitimately atrocious. It's hard to square the size of the disparity between the good effects and the bad ones. It's as though 2 separate teams were working at the same time, with only one team blessed with the gift of sight, and allowed only to work using a Game Boy. However, as far as we can tell, all the effects were done by Jackson's native Weta, which makes it absolutely baffling. Number 6. 2005 King Kong structure. Despite, in parts, being many people's favourite movie of the year it was released, the clear 3-act structure really does have a whiplash-inducing transformation of location, narrative, and even genres that requires reorientation at least twice during the film. Avengers Endgame employed the same clear 3-act structure to their Infinity Saga denouement, including clear switches in genre. However, they were more successful, and it at least came across like one cohesive whole, whereas 2005's Kong is reminiscent of a different type of whole. Thankfully, for a Peter Jackson movie, the audience gets an elongated amount of time in which to pivot between acts, because it does seem as if he's taken a trilogy of movies and crushed them into a feature's runtime. The reviewers of the time were correct when they said it was operatic, as it lasted 74 hours. Just. The middle act is pure silver screen monsterverse joy, with ancient terrifying beasts of incredible scale battling it out with our eponymous ape. However, the first and third acts are overly languid, and another edit was needed, leaving it at a more preferable 2.5-hour film, rather than the bottom-numbing 3 hours and 21 minutes we were forced to endure. If a mayfly was a film fan and tuned in when a child, they'd miss their teenage years and come out an adult, as it would take up 7.5% of their entire life cycle. I am, however, unsure whether Peter Jackson was catering for the mayfly demographic whilst writing. Number 7. Human saviour characters. Audience surrogates or viewpoint characters are people written into a movie or TV show specifically for the audience to identify with. These are often used when the world the film occupies and the other characters who inhabit the same space are wildly larger than life and alien in their presentation and demeanour. It's Harry in The Philosopher's Stone, or Luke Skywalker in Star Wars. When the universe they reside in is so hard to fathom, we need that protagonist to ground us in this world, and usually that viewpoint figure has certain powers and strengths that aid them in navigating whichever obstacles the narrative throws at them. However, these abilities can be silly in their execution and contrived in their writing, and in a world populated with fantastically powerful leviathans, protagonists tend to hold dominion over these creatures for cretinously incidental reasoning. The beautiful young women that Kong ends up fascinated with and ends up sacrificing his life for smacks of lazy writing. Whether Vina Fay Ray, brilliant name, in the 1933 original, Jessica Lange in the 76 version, 2005's Naomi Watts, Skull Island's Edam Larson, or the otherwise excellent Kaylee Hottle in Godzilla vs. Kong and its recent sequel. Exactly why a monster the size of a building would create such a deep loving connection to not only a different species, but one that's the size of a hamster in comparison is beyond me. Maybe Richard Gere could fill in the blanks. I love my pets, as I do 99% of people in the world. Maybe 98, maybe 12. However, choosing death over this insect comes across as quirky at best. And when these women are part of a company of other humans who have shown nothing but animalistic aggression towards you, then you do have to wonder why Kong simply doesn't just swat these young ladies away like flies. Number 8. Godzilla vs. Kong. This pet peeve was raised in our Godzilla video last week. However, a top 10 list of the 8th wonder of the world wouldn't be complete without mention of a movie that's 50% enjoyable self-aware romp and 50% dumbest movie ever created. The sheer list of overused tropes, click above for our overused trope series, plays like a very dangerous to your body drinking game, and the idiocy of the decisions made by the human characters are only matched by those made by the filmmakers who created the thing. If Merian C. Cooper could watch the films today, well, he would be overawed with the effects, frankly, but severely underwhelmed by the rest of it. Number 9. Kong's childlike intelligence. He has stood at a number of different heights during his depictions on screen. As we know, during his debut in the 30s, one of the directors, Merian C. Cooper, disclosed their intention of raising and lowering Kong's height purposefully to fit each specific scene he was in, smaller for the inside and larger outside. However, even in his smaller iterations, Kong has a brain that would be larger than most creatures who have lived on the planet. Yes, brain size on its own is not a measurement that scientists use to calculate intelligence. It is brain size compared to body size. But even then, the likelihood Kong would have an almost identical, slightly more intelligent brain capacity to his simian cousins of normal stature seem not only incorrect, but also a missed opportunity. Even though modern depictions of the abnormal ape have imbued Kong with more intelligence than originally presented, he still has very spontaneous tendencies, decision-making, and demeanour of someone with a far lower IQ than he should have, though really in the original film, everyone who wasn't a white man was depicted as savage and childlike heathens. This probably wouldn't have raised many eyebrows. Speaking of which, Number 10. 1933 and 2005's King Kong controversy. Politics is something we don't wish to dwell upon on a light-hearted movie and TV YouTube channel. However, one cannot do a deep dive on the silver screen's facets of King Kong and be myopic when faced with the controversy that the two aforementioned movies face. Racist issues that were levelled at the 1930s original, which included the Sentinel Island-esque locals when they got to Kong's home, who instantly greet the protagonist with furious and murderous tendencies, along with minority characters only serving their so-called masters just to be killed off unceremoniously. There are issues that could be hand-waved away by some as anachronistic, typical for the time period. However, the 2005 movie doesn't have a leg to stand on, especially when utilising white actors literally in blackface when back in New York. Some have tried to justify this odd decision to carry this over from the 1933 flick, saying it is accurate to the time. However, you could use incredibly hurtful moments in every film or TV show using this rationale. The feelings towards this decision, along with the depiction of the instant murderous tendencies of the natives at Kong's Island, really has received vociferous arguments on both sides, and is a discussion one is frankly intimidated to be a part of, but we can't in good conscience skip past these issues without highlighting both sides of the furore.
Oh, there he goes again!
What we can say is that, as a person, Jackson comes across as one of the most inclusive people around, and it's hard not to trust in his opinions on matters. However, perhaps this was a case where his prodigious common sense could have been utilised differently. Either way, let's hope the upcoming Monsterverse installments eschew any form of controversy in favour of interesting storytelling and excellent action, and consign any of the controversies previously levelled at the franchise to a land that time forgot. Feel free to subscribe for all our videos and upcoming episodes. We're doing The Walking Dead next week. Click on the left for our top 10 pet peeves for Ghostbusters, or the right for antagonists throwing protagonists in our overused trope series. All the best.